My name is Jen Dorsey. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Mechanicsville Elementary School, and today I'd like to show you how our students can use their knowledge of fractions to develop their understanding of decimals concepts. Let's take a look at a situation. Tom has planted carrots in 4/10 of his garden. Now, in our 4th grade classrooms, our students will be expected to draw their own representation of 4/10. I've already done that for you today. I've set up a grid and I've partitioned it equally into 10 pieces. To show 4/10, I'm going to shade in 4 of these tenths. It's a great start. Before we can represent 4/10 as a decimal though, we need to think about what our students already understand about place value. To this point, our students have worked very frequently with place value of whole numbers. They are very comfortable with numbers like this. Our students would very happily tell you that the number 236 has a 6 in the ones place, a 3 in the tens place, and that our 2 is in our hundreds place. When we begin working with decimals, we teach our students that we use a decimal point to the right of the ones place to show that the values that follow are less than 1 whole. This place right here, to the immediate right of the decimal, is what we call our tenths place. Let's think about Tom's garden for a moment. Tom does not have anything planted in his entire whole garden. That means to represent this value as a decimal, we need to have a 0 in our 1 whole place. We're going to follow that 0 with a decimal point to show that the value we record after is less than 1 whole. If we look at Tom's garden, we can see that he has 4/10 of his garden planted with carrots. That means we need to record a 4 in our tenths place. We would read this number as 4/10, exactly the same way that we would read the fractional representation of 4/10, because these two values are equivalent. Let's take a look at Tom's neighbor Joe. Joe actually has 2 whole gardens in his backyard. And Joe has planted carrots in 1 and 3/10 of his gardens. He eats a lot of carrots. To represent this, we need to shade in 1 whole garden, and 3/10 of his other garden. 2, 3. When we think about writing this value as a decimal, we need to go back to thinking about our whole numbers. This time we know that Joe does have 1 whole garden planted with carrots. That means we can record the digit 1 in the ones place. We also know that Joe has 3/10 of his second garden planted with carrots. To represent this part of the whole, we need to follow our 1 whole with a decimal point and a 3 in our tenths place. We would read this value as 1 and 3/10, exactly the same way that we would read the mixed number of 1 and 3/10. Because again, these values are equal. Let's take a look at one other type of decimal. Now, in 4th grade, we actually have our students working with decimal values to the hundredths place. You might notice I haven't recorded my hundredths place up here at all yet. We find the hundredths place to the immediate right of our tenths place, right here. 100th means that we would have 1/100th of one whole. To show that, we would need to take one whole and partition it into 100 equal parts. I've already done that for you today. Here's what 100th looks like. You can see just how small that is compared to 1/10. In fact, it actually takes 10 100ths to equal 1/10, which would be this entire column. To represent 1/100th as a decimal, we would need to reflect that we have 0 holes shaded. But looking at our grid, we also have 0/10ths shaded in. So a 0 is recorded in our tenths place. Since we only have 1/100th shaded, we're going to record a 1 in our hundredths place. We read this number as 1/100th, exactly as we would read the fractional representation. Let's try just one more value. If I give you a value like 62/100ths, we would first need to represent this using a visual. Now, our students can count out 62 actual 100ths, or they can realize that 1/10 is equal to 10 100ths, and choose to represent this by shading in 10 100ths at a time. This gets me 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 61, 62 100ths. Now that I've shaded in 62 100ths, it's time to represent this as a decimal. Again, we have 0 holes reflected here. So we need a 0 in our ones place, followed by a decimal point. We can see that we actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths that make up this number, 62 hundredths. So we record a 6 in our tenths place. We have 2 100ths shaded, so we record a 2 in our hundredths place. And we would read this value as 62 100ths, exactly as we read the fractional representation of 62 100ths. This is how we teach our students to relate their fractional understandings to their knowledge of decimals.